You probably think of jealousy as something ugly, a flaw to fix, a weakness to hide. But jealousy isn't just about wanting what someone else has. It's not just about fear, or rage, or insecurity. Jealousy is more layered than that, more human. To understand jealousy is to understand a part of yourself that doesn't respond to logic, a part that feels threatened even when you're safe, that flinches when others succeed, that aches when you imagine being left behind. You might not want to admit it, but jealousy lives in you, not because you're broken, but because you care. The first mistake we make is confusing jealousy with envy. They're close cousins, but not twins. Envy says, I want what you have. Jealousy says, I'm afraid of losing what I already have. Envy is about lack. Jealousy is about threat. If your partner laughs too much with someone else, that sting you feel, that's jealousy. The fear that someone might replace you. If your friend gets a promotion and you feel left behind, that's envy. The pain of comparison. Jealousy is possessive. Envy is competitive. But here's the deeper truth. Neither emotion is inherently bad. Both evolved for a reason. Evolutionary psychologists argue that jealousy served a survival function. In early human societies, protecting bonds and ensuring loyalty could mean the difference between life and death. A jealous mate might have been more vigilant, more protective, more likely to ensure their children were their own. Jealousy helped ensure investment, protection, and continuity, messy as it was. That evolutionary residue still lingers in your nervous system. Today, you don't need to fend off rivals in the village, but the emotional circuits that evolved to scan for threats, they're still firing. They don't care that your partner just followed their ex on Instagram. Your brain interprets it as danger. And that brings us to the modern amplifier of jealousy, social comparison. You used to compare yourself to people you actually knew, neighbors, co-workers, friends. Now, you compare yourself to curated fragments of strangers' lives, the filtered vacations, the gym selfies, the endless highlight reels, and the result? A gnawing sense that everyone else has more, looks better, loves deeper, lives freer. Psychologist Leon Festinger coined the term social comparison theory to explain how we evaluate ourselves based on others. We measure our worth not in absolutes, but in relation to what we see around us. And thanks to social media, that comparison never stops. So, when you feel jealous, not just of lovers, but of friends, colleagues, influencers, what you're really feeling is a collision of longing and fear. The longing to be enough, the fear that you're not. Philosopher Alain de Botton once said, our envy is a reflection of what we are most insecure about. And he's right. Jealousy doesn't expose other people's flaws. It reveals your own wounds. It shows you where you feel unworthy, where you're still aching for reassurance, where you believe love is something to be earned, not something you deserve. That's the irony. Jealousy looks like anger, but it's often rooted in grief, the grief of not being chosen, of not feeling seen, of fearing you never will be. So instead of demonizing jealousy, what if you listened to it, not indulged it, not justified it, but gently asked, what are you afraid of losing? And what does that fear say about how you see yourself? Jealousy isn't your enemy. It's a mirror. It reflects your deepest needs, your unmet wounds, your hidden hunger for connection, worth, and certainty. In the next part, we'll explore how insecurity, abandonment, and past relationship traumas shape the way jealousy shows up in your life, and why most of what you think is about the other person is really just about you. If jealousy is a mirror, then what it reflects is rarely about the person in front of you. It's about the story behind you, the silent blueprint of your self-worth, drawn in childhood, reinforced by experience, and brought into every relationship you've ever had. You see, jealousy doesn't arise in a vacuum. It feeds on insecurity, thrives in the shadows of low self-esteem, and blooms in relationships where trust has never had a chance to root deeply. It tells you, again and again, that you are not enough, that you could be replaced, that love is always conditional, fragile, temporary, earned. And where does that belief come from? Often, it begins long before romance enters your life. If you grew up in an environment where affection was inconsistent, where love was given but also withdrawn, praised but also punished, you may have learned to associate attachment with anxiety. Psychologists call this anxious attachment. and it's one of the most fertile grounds for jealousy to grow. You learn to monitor, to anticipate rejection, to scan for signs that someone might leave. And now, even when your partner is loyal, you can't silence the alarm bells. On the other hand, if your early experiences taught you that emotional closeness leads to disappointment or abandonment, you may lean toward avoidant attachment. In this case, jealousy still appears, but instead of fueling clinginess, it triggers withdrawal. You might shut down emotionally or pretend not to care, even as jealousy simmers beneath the surface. The psychoanalyst Melanie Klein suggested that we internalize early experiences of love and loss so deeply that they shape how we relate to others throughout life. If those early attachments were marked by fear or inconsistency, then every close relationship becomes a stage where old anxieties are replayed. And when you've been hurt in the past, betrayed, cheated on, dismissed, those experiences create emotional templates. Even in new relationships, the echoes of past pain whisper doubts. You assume history will repeat itself. You expect betrayal, even without evidence. And jealousy becomes your misguided attempt at control, as if keeping your guard up will protect you from heartbreak. But the tragedy of jealousy is that it often creates the very distance you fear. When you let insecurity drive you, you may start policing your partner's actions, reading too deeply into their tone, accusing them of things they haven't done. And slowly, the relationship bends under the weight of mistrust. Philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche once wrote, "Love is blind, friendship closes its eyes, but jealousy, it imagines, it fabricates, it fills in the blanks with your worst fears and calls it intuition." In romantic relationships, jealousy can quickly become corrosive. It chips away at communication, turning conversations into interrogations. It distorts trust, replacing it with suspicion, and it erodes intimacy because true closeness requires vulnerability, not vigilance. But here's something crucial. Feeling jealous does not make you toxic. What makes jealousy destructive is when it goes unexamined and unchecked, when you believe it justifies control, when you use it as a weapon instead of a warning. Addressing jealousy requires courage, the kind of emotional honesty that doesn't come easily. It means admitting your fears, not hiding them behind anger or sarcasm. It means saying, "I feel insecure," instead of, "You're making me jealous." It means owning your emotions instead of outsourcing the blame. And sometimes, addressing jealousy also means seeking professional help. Therapy can help you unpack the deeper roots of your fear, the childhood wounds, the old betrayals, the beliefs you carry about what you deserve. Because until those roots are addressed, jealousy will continue to resurface, no matter how loving your partner is. Finally, you can't talk about jealousy without talking about boundaries. Clear, respectful boundaries in a relationship aren't about controlling the other person. They're about creating a space where both people feel secure. They give jealousy less room to grow because they replace ambiguity with clarity. They show that love is not a guessing game. You may never eliminate jealousy entirely, but you can soften it, understand it, and slowly, with effort, learn to live in relationships where you're no longer ruled by fear, but guided by trust. In the final part, we'll explore how to cope with jealousy when it arises, how to turn it into self-awareness instead of self-sabotage, and how to move toward a more grounded, secure kind of love. If jealousy reveals where we feel small, then healing from jealousy begins with learning how to feel big again, not in ego, but in groundedness, not in comparison, but in clarity, because jealousy doesn't disappear when we suppress it. It softens when we understand it. The first step is learning to pause. When jealousy strikes, the instinct is to react, to confront, to accuse, to spiral. But what if instead you got curious? What if you noticed the story running in your mind and asked, "Is this story true, or is it just familiar?" This is the power of mindfulness, not the absence of emotion, but the presence of awareness. In the words of psychologist Brach, when we pause, we begin to trust in our natural intelligence. Mindfulness gives you a moment between feeling and reacting, and in that moment, you get to choose. You can choose inquiry over impulse, compassion over control. Practicing self-compassion is critical. Jealousy is often laced with shame. We feel guilty for feeling threatened, for not being chill, for caring too much. But self-compassion reminds you that emotions aren't moral failures. They're messengers. And when you stop punishing yourself for feeling jealous, you can start learning from it. Building self-worth is the long game, because the less you rely on others to define your value, the less jealousy grips you by the throat. This doesn't mean becoming detached or aloof. It means recognizing that your worth isn't up for negotiation, even in the presence of someone else's beauty, success, or desirability. Philosopher Simone de Beauvoir once wrote, "To be oneself, to be unique and irreplaceable, is to escape the tyranny of comparison." Real confidence isn't about being the best. It's about knowing that someone else's brilliance doesn't dim your own, that someone else being admired doesn't make you invisible. And here's the paradox. The more securely you're rooted in your own worth, the more freely you can love others. Jealousy thrives in scarcity. Love thrives in abundance. When you believe there's not enough love, attention, or validation to go around, you become territorial. But when you realize your value isn't conditional, you stop grasping. You start relating. Gratitude can shift this mindset. Instead of obsessing over what you lack, their attention, someone else's achievements, focus on what you already have. Gratitude reminds you that your life is not empty, that your relationships, your experiences, your growth all have value that comparison tends to erase. Of course, none of this means jealousy is easy to fix. It's not a switch to flip. For many, healing requires professional support, therapy that helps untangle past wounds and rewire the beliefs that keep you stuck. Attachment wounds, childhood trauma, betrayal, these aren't things you get over. They're things you walk through, slowly, with help. It also means being intentional about the attachments you form. Secure relationships, ones built on mutual respect, open communication, and clear boundaries, help reduce jealousy by creating safety. When your partner or friend reassures you consistently, when you feel seen without begging to be, the survival alarm inside you quiets down. And finally, there's forgiveness, not just for others, but for yourself. Forgiveness for the times you reacted from fear, for the moments you let jealousy push people away, for the ways you've doubted your worth over and over again. Forgiveness is not forgetting the past. It's choosing not to live there anymore. Jealousy will visit. That's part of being human, but it doesn't have to unpack and stay. With awareness, compassion, and effort, you can learn to respond to it differently, not with panic, not with self-loathing, but with a quiet understanding. This feeling is here, and it's trying to show me something. When you stop treating jealousy as a flaw and start treating it as a teacher, everything changes. Your relationships deepen, your self-awareness sharpens, and slowly, you begin to live from a place of wholeness, not fear.